thank you for having us here today. Around 18 months ago, Paul came to me and said that his foundation had had a conversation and decided that the legacy they wanted to leave was making a really valuable contribution to building a system for social innovation in Australia. And so over the last 18 months, 2 years, we've been working with a range of folk across Australia and Paul's foundation, the Donkey Wheel Foundation, to really, I guess, practice what we preach and approach this in quite an intentional way. And I guess the question that we repeatedly come back to at TACSI is how do we make progress towards solutions that match the scale of the challenges we're all here and all trying to solve? And at the moment, and as I've sort of listened to people talk throughout the day, I've thought about some of the people that we're working with at the moment, or some of the bright spots in Australia. And at the moment, in Melbourne, there's a group of Indigenous elders who have bandied together because they're really disturbed about the number of their people that are pouring into the justice system and how that's changing the trajectory for generations to follow. We've got a new group, a new tech startup in Adelaide who are exploring artificial intelligence as a way to predict early challenges around children and poor mental health. But we also have a whole country of providers at the moment grappling with the fact that we've completely disrupted the way we support people with a disability in Australia. And we've introduced a scheme called the National Disability Insurance Scheme and have created a quasi-marketplace. And this is fundamentally changing the way that these providers have to do business. Many of them not surviving, others really thriving. But the interesting thing for me is that none of these people would ever interact with a conference like we're at today. None of these people would click on an article titled Social Innovation. And most of them are living in the problem, on the ground, figuring out how they make people's lives just that little bit better. So how do we find solutions that match the scale of the problems we're trying to solve? How do we rally the masses around that? Because until we can get beyond these networks of 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000, we're not going to achieve that. So it's been an amazing opportunity with the Donkey Wheel Foundation, and we're approaching it. We're trying to practice what we preach and really thinking about what are the assumptions we're holding around what we need to actually move social innovation from the fringes in Australia to something that perhaps isn't quite mainstream yet, because I think that's way too in the future for us, but something that is taken seriously. And for us, one of the biggest insights so far is that talking about social innovation ecosystems is not the leading narrative. And how do we actually engage people in solving problems, leveraging opportunities, and different ways we can go about that? So welcome to my friends, Paul, and we've also got Meld Studios here from Melbourne. Sorry, I'm an Adelaide girl through and through.
It is the middle of the night where we are.
So first of all, Paul, I thought it would be great to explore, because you knew I was going to ask you this question, the role of philanthropy, given the investment in Australia in alternative ways of solving problems, and social innovation is so small. How do we change that, and how does philanthropy help us lead the charge with that?
I think, and you've probably heard a few speakers today talk about, where philanthropy needs to play. And I think one of the things that happens, particularly in Australia, but from my view, probably around the globe, is philanthropists often love to fund the very front-end service delivery, where the beneficiary is well known and the outcomes are kind of predictable. But where philanthropy should play is in the riskier innovation end. And at that point, your outcomes are less known, who's actually going to benefit is less known, but the opportunity for real change at the kind of scale that we need completely changes. Because if you're just funding the front-end service, you might affect 10 or 20 or 100 people. But if you can fund that ecosystem, the capacity to be able to go out and truly innovate, truly implement, and truly find the investment you need to be able to pull off some kind of system-level change, that's where I think philanthropy has an opportunity to play, where there really isn't the kind of finance that is available at the other end. By the time you've designed well, incubated, worked out how it works, at that point you generally know a better way of funding it, whether that be because government will save money, it might be because it has good commercial outcomes, but at that very early stage where it's less known, that's where philanthropy has an opportunity to play, because it's the kind of money that can take that kind of risk. And one of the things that, from a donkey wheel perspective, we truly believe in is change makers. And that can be anyone from a social innovator to a social entrepreneur to anybody who just really wants to make the world a better place. But the one thing we know is that in order for them to really thrive, you have to build an ecosystem, the word we kind of fall back on, but in the end, you have to build some support for them. You have to give them relationships. You have to give them tools and techniques. And you actually just have to give them a shoulder to cry on sometimes when it all feels too hard. And that's really the position that our foundation has taken. How do we create those places, those techniques, the tools, the support, the infrastructure to help change makers, rather than necessarily doing the support of some program at the front end? And I truly challenge anyone in the philanthropy space here. That is a place you can play. It's a place that really changes the nature of how we engage problems. The little way that I can explain this well is I come from a tech background, and in that wonderful space of tech entrepreneurship, wonderfully infrastructured environment, more support than you can ever believe is possible. But one of the reasons for that is because people realise the kind of outcomes that it could produce. Not that in the social space we want to take the risk of looking for the unicorn. I like the saying that in the social space we don't have the right to be wrong. In the tech space we have a lot of right to be wrong. In the social space we don't. So we can't take as much risk. We've got to build really good support mechanisms in for people to be able to transverse from the idea to fully implemented services and products and ways of communities operating.
Thank you, Paul. And do you think, from Meld's perspective, and Meld is a design studio in Australia that is working across Australia with government doing really interesting briefs from quite a design-focused perspective. What do you feel are the opportunities if you were able to leverage new and different partnerships, investment opportunities, networked opportunities, all of those things that are fairly absent in Australia for us at the moment?
So what are the opportunities if we could leverage those things? I think that to kind of go back before that question is where we're at now. So where we're at now is that there are a lot of people who really want to make change for good. And a lot of people, the light has switched on for them that that's a possibility, whether they work in private organisations or public organisations. They don't know how, and they don't necessarily have the skill. And they also are working in their own little silos and bubbles. So I think that if we want to escalate the change and make more impact, we have to start to allow them to see each other and work across and with each other. And I think that's really missing right now. We've done some really basic things to try and get people to connect. Hey, did you know that you're all working on domestic violence problems at the moment? Do you know that you're all trying to set up these different systems for young people who can't find employment? So trying to connect them. But I think if we had more resources, we would do more of that to bring everybody on a similar journey, because right now they have their little pots of money and their little bits of responsibility that they have to deliver to, and they can't see past that. That's a waste.
Absolutely. Yeah. So in Australia, we've it was in January, it was about January 19th, we released the National Innovation Strategy in Australia. And it's a strategy that's sort of really underpinned by assumptions around economic growth. It's a commercial innovation strategy, and many of us tried to influence but didn't get too far, and I know that's been many countries' experience. But Paul, I was wondering if you could, given your experience in the tech area, give us some insight as to how we can show government, how we can show leaders that the world of commercial and social innovation don't have to sit entirely separately.
Yeah. So one of my fundamental beliefs is that you can do good and make money, and in fact, you have to. So the economic imperative is actually a really important one when we're thinking about social change. And unfortunately, I think most governments don't think that way. And particularly in Australia, we're quite committed to our social support system. And so government tends just to think of social as an expense. And, you know, we've heard some of the kind of costs today. And I think the opportunities that lie around actually understanding balance sheet accounting, where we really understand our liabilities going forward as communities, as nations, we could really change the way that we account for things to be able to drive it. And I think that it's one of the mechanisms that government does listen to. And while we've got a little bit of work happening in that in Australia, you know, it's one of those things I'd love to learn more about what's happening in many of the other countries. How do we really understand the liabilities that we have as communities, that if we did more work in innovation, in design, in thinking about things right now, we could avoid some of those costs. And we could actually spend money now that makes perfect sense to spend now. So I think that's one of the key ways. The other key issue is kind of what you're talking about before. How do we actually help our governments? We have 3 layers of government for 25 million people. And that's a lot of governance. But getting those guys to talk to each other needs somebody outside of that system to be able to do that. And so how we can make that happen as well would be a critical factor, I think, in being able to bring an innovation agenda to the social agenda that we have.
But what about the boring revolution? And I know you and I disagree on this, so this is going to be interesting. But I think that there are some instances where you can't make money. And I think exploring some of the topics that have come up today around we need different types of governance, we need to think about different movements and coalitions, we need to think about different accounting mechanisms. There are some instances and changes that need to happen that aren't going to fit into a business model that's going to generate money.
Today. It's not going to fit today. But I have to believe that if we really value it as communities, if we can start to put a dollar value on externalities, where we actually put the right price on water, we put the right price on community capital, however you want to define that. If we actually say these things are valuable for us, then I genuinely believe our economic system has to match the things that are valuable to us. Yeah. They can't just be the things that we want to be extractive about.
That's right. But even to build on that, Paul, what about, you talked a little about opportunity costs. So we were talking to a government the other day about unemployment for young people and how much it would cost to put new programs in place. And one of the things we said to them is, well, how much does it cost to have someone unemployed for their whole life? Because we were talking about 18 to 21-year-olds who might never get a job. And that person went, oh my goodness, we need some figures on that. And that was a great moment. Because how much money would we save if that person wasn't receiving benefits, didn't go, potentially didn't go to jail, potentially didn't, all the things that can happen when they don't get a job. So maybe we don't make money, but we can save money from other places and make it worthwhile.
I just think we as a community have to say these are the things that are valuable for us and we will pay for them. Quite simply, art, culture, sport, there's a whole bunch of things we choose to pay for. And in the same way, we need to actually say social cohesion, opportunity and a chance for every person in our community to thrive is worth the money.
And I guess lastly, if we talk about rallying the masses, and we've seen some fantastic examples where we've been able to work with families, and even families who have had children removed from them. They've got their children back home. They've found meaning from that fairly traumatic experience that's happened to them. They've gone on to support other families or to play a different role in the community. They then, through that meaning, get into training and employment opportunities. And I've even employed some of those people at the Australian Centre for Social Innovation since. How do we unlock community, family, households, neighbourhoods as an asset and include them in our movement, include them in this movement of social innovation? Because having us sit here and having people who love to sort of nerd out and talk about social innovation methods and tools is not going to unlock the potential that we're going to need if we want to find solutions that match the scale of the challenges we're trying to solve. So I guess that's the challenge that I would love to leave with us all today, is how do we think about ecosystems that really think about what we need from the top down, but are also not afraid to really go deep into the communities, households, families, and leverage the latent assets that exist there, and look at how we really engage and build ecosystems that are going to build from the bottom up as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn.